Once upon a time, in the beautiful city of Abuja, there lived a girl named Nkoli. She was the only daughter of Chief Agozie, a renowned international businessman whose name commanded respect across industries. Chief Agozie was not just rich, he was powerful, influential, and feared. His wealth stretched beyond Nigeria, with businesses and estates scattered across different countries. Nkoli was not an only child. She was a twin. She and her brother Uche had been inseparable since birth. They had shared everything: laughter, secrets, and childhood adventures. Though they looked alike, their personalities were as different as night and day. Nkoli was wild spirited, free like the wind, always seeking adventure, while Uche was reserved and obedient, the one who never questioned their father's rules. But despite their differences, they loved each other deeply, and their bond was unshakable. As they grew older, their lives began to take different shapes, not by their choice though, but by the iron will of their father. Chifagozi was a man who believed in control. He planned everything down to the last detail, including the futures of his children. Uche and Nkoli were not allowed to dream their own dreams or make their own choices. Even the people they were to marry had already been decided. Nkoli was betrothed to Okudiri, the son of her father's wealthy business partner. He had inherited his father's empire and walked around with an air of importance. Okudiri was rich, handsome, and had a charming smile, but beneath that smile was a man full of arrogance. Nkoli, my love, he would say, you are so lucky. Do you know how many women throw themselves at me every single day? But my father's dying wish was for me to marry his best friend's daughter. And that's the only reason I'm marrying you. So consider yourself honored. Nkoli hated the way he spoke, the way he carried himself like a god among men. Every time she saw him, her heart filled with frustration. How could she spend the rest of her life with a man who saw her as nothing more than a business deal? When the date of the marriage was fixed, the entire household burst into celebration. Wedding preparations were in full swing. Tailors came in daily to take measurements, try out fittings over and over. And so did the decorators. But in the midst of all the excitement, Nkoli felt nothing but misery. One evening, she went to the father's study, knelt before him and pleaded, Papa, please, I don't want to marry Okudiri. Let me choose a husband for myself. Chifagosi didn't even look up from the documents on his desk. His voice was final, sharp like a blade. You must marry Okudiri, and that is final. Nkoli left the study with tears in her eyes, her heart heavy with helplessness. She had never been allowed to make a single decision in her entire life. Her school, her courses, her friends, everything had to be decided for her. Now, even the man she was to spend forever with was forced on her. As the wedding drew closer, she realized something. If she didn't take control of her life now, she never would. Then 3 days before wedding, an idea struck her. Early that morning, she walked into Uche's room and found him on a call with his fiance, Ijoma. They had never met in person, but they spoke like lovers who had known each other forever. The warmth in Uche's voice as he spoke to her was something Nkoli had never felt for Okudiri. A thought flashed in her mind, and without hesitation, she walked up to Uche. Uche, can I speak to Ijoma? Uche gave her a confused look but handed over his phone. Nkoli held the phone close to her ear. Ijoma, please, where do you live? Akwuete, Ijoma's voice came through the speaker. Nkoli's heartbeat quickened. How do I get to Akwuete from Abuja? There was a brief silence. Then Ijoma responded, I will text you the route, but once you get into Akwete, you have to call me so I can give you proper directions. Nkoli glanced at Uche and saw the alarm in his eyes. He had figured out what she was planning before he could say a word. She grabbed his hands. Please, Uche, don't say a word about anything you heard. I beg you. Uche stared at her in disbelief, but after a long pause, he nodded. That night, While the entire household slept, Nkoli packed a small bag with a few of her belongings. She didn't take much, only what she needed. Then at the first light of dawn, she slipped out of the mansion, her heart pounding. She didn't look back. Nkoli had no idea what awaited her in Akwuete, but she knew one thing for sure. She wanted to make a choice for herself for the first time in her life. The sun had barely risen when Nkoli stepped out of the gates of her father's mansion. The street was quiet, except for a few early risers heading back to work. The morning air was cool against her skin, but her palms were as sweaty as she gripped the small bag she had packed the night before. This is it oh, there's no turning back from here. Nkoli knew her father well. The moment he discovered she was gone, he would turn the entire city upside down to find her. Chief Chifagozi was not a man who tolerated disobedience, and she had never disobeyed him before until now. She had to be smart. Nkoli pulled the hoodie of her sweatshirt over her head and walked briskly to the main road where she flagged down a taxi. Where to? The driver asked, eyeing her through the rearview mirror. Jabi Motor Park, she said quickly, naming one of the biggest transport hubs in Abuja. It was her best chance of finding a bus heading east. The ride to the park was nerve-wracking. Every time another car pulled up beside them, she feared it was her father's security team. She had seen how they operated, swift and efficient. If they caught her, she would never get another chance. By the time they arrived at the park, her hands were trembling. The area was bustling with activity, bus conductors shouting destinations, traders selling food and drinks, travelers haggling over ticket prices. Nkoli wasted no time. She walked straight to a row of buses marked Abuja on Owerri, knowing that Akwuete was somewhere between those routes. She approached the young man who was loading luggage into the back of a bus. Please, do you have a bus going to Akwuete? Akwuete? He frowned, then pointed to an older man collecting fares. Go and ask Oga Chigozie, he will tell you. Nkoli hurried over to the man. Good morning, sir. I need to get to Akwuete. He eyed her curiously. Akwuete? That's a village stop. We don't go all the way there, but we pass through a nearby town. You fit drop for Umuahia and find keke from there. Nkoli nodded, relieved. How much is the fare? 7,000 naira. She dug into her bag, pulled out the money and handed it to him. He counted it carefully before waving her towards the bus. Go sit inside. We leave in 30 minutes. Nkoli climbed in, chose a seat by the window and let out a shaky breath. I made it this far. Now I just have to make it to Akwuete. The journey was long and exhausting. The bus rattled over pothole-filled roads, stopping at several towns to pick up and drop off passengers. Nkoli kept her head down, avoiding unnecessary conversations. She checked her phone once they got to Lokoja. A missed call from Uche. Her chest tightened. He must have woken up and found her gone. She turned off her phone. I can't risk him calling me again, at least not yet. Hours later, when they finally approached Umuahia, she turned her phone back on and dialed Ijeoma's number. Ijeoma, I'm in Umuahia, she whispered. Ijeoma's response was quick. Okay, find the keke going to Akwuete Junction. When you get there, call me. Nkoli followed the instructions. The moment she stepped out of the keke at Akwuete Junction, a wave of uncertainty washed over her. She had made it, but now what? As she reached into her pockets to bring out her phone, her fingers met nothing but fabric. She froze. Where is your phone? Frantically, she checked her bag, then her jeans pocket, then the small zipper pouch inside her bag where she had kept her wallet. A cold chill ran down her spine. Someone had stolen from her, either on the bus or in the keke. Her money, her phone, everything. She turned in circles, scanning the crowd. People bustled around her, oblivious to her panic. Akwuete was nothing like Abuja. There were no towering buildings, no flashy cars, just small shops, dusty roads, and people minding their business. What do I do now? She asked. Nkoli swallowed her panic and approached a middle-aged woman selling roasted corn by the roadside. Good afternoon ma. Please can I use your phone to make a call? My bag was stolen. The woman gave her a suspicious look, then sighed and handed her the phone. Nkoli quickly dialed Che's number. He would know what to do. The line rang once, twice, then call failed. Nkoli tried again. No service. She stared at the phone in horror. Network issues. Her heart pounded. She had no money, nowhere to reach Ijoma, and no idea where to go. What now? Then, as she wandered aimlessly around the junction, she saw it. A signpost. Vacancy. Housemaid wanted. Nkoli's breath hitched. Was this a sign? She stared at the signpost, her mind racing. She had never worked a day in her life, never cleaned anything herself, but right now, she had few choices, and for the first time, she had to make her own choice. She clenched her fist. If this was the price for freedom, then so be it. Nkoli trudged along the dusty roadside, her feet aching with each step. She clutched her small bag, the only possession she had left. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, but she pushed forward. She had no choice. Please, sir, where is this vacancy? She asked the bike man standing idly by the roadside. The man glanced at her, then pointed ahead. That fine white house over there, with a black gate. Nkoli followed his gesture. The house was a large modern duplex with sleek cream-colored walls. The gate was gigantic. When she knocked, the gateman opened the gate, directing her to the living room. The compound was somewhat large and impeccably maintained. She took a deep breath and knocked on the door. Moments later, a plump woman with a round face and a frown peered out. Her eyes swept over Nkoli in open disapproval. Yes, what do you want? Good afternoon, ma. I saw a vacancy for a housemaid. I came to apply, Nkoli said politely. The woman scoffed. You look too soft for the kind of work I have in mind. Have you done house chores before? Nkoli nodded quickly. Yes, ma. Well, come inside. Several questions followed, and finally the woman said, we'll put you on probation for 3 months. Once you can satisfy that you can do it, then you'll be hired. The woman led her into the house. My name is Madam Amaka, the woman said, crossing her arms. I don't tolerate nonsense in this house. You can ask other domestic staff around. I recently sacked the cook and cleaner cause I can no longer handle a lot of staff here. My husband, Chief Ikenna, is late, so I run this house now. You have to clean, cook, wash, and I don't want any excuses. Do you understand? Yes, ma, Nkoli replied softly. Just then, a young woman strolled into the living room, her perfume filling the air before she even spoke. Dressed in a tight short gown, her nails freshly painted red, she carried herself like a queen. This is my daughter Ijoma, Madam Maka said proudly. Nkoli kept her face neutral, unaware that this introduction would change her life forever. Ijoma barely glanced at her. Mom, another maid? Oh, she's not as useless as the ones you just sacked. Madam Maka chuckled. She claims she can walk. We will find out now. Ijoma turned to Nkoli, her gaze cold and dismissive. Listen, girl, I don't like dirty or slow people. If you mess up, you are out. Nkoli swallowed the lump in her throat. Yes, ma. And so her nightmares began. At first, Nkoli tried to be hopeful. The work was exhausting, but she believed she could endure it. She woke up before dawn, sweeping the compound and scrubbing the floors. Breakfast had to be ready by 6 a.m. and every meal had to be perfect. The first time she made a mistake, she learned what kind of house she had entered. You useless girl! You call this breakfast? Madam Maka screamed one morning, slamming the pap onto the table. The meal splashed onto Nkoli's feet. I said thick pap, not stone. I'm sorry, ma, Nkoli stammered, but her apology earned her a sharp slap across the face. Sorry for yourself, Madam Maka spat. You better learn fast. Nkoli did learn. She learned that silence was safer than protest. She learned that speed was more important than exhaustion. She learned that in this house, she was not a person but a servant. Ijeoma was worse. Her cruelty wasn't loud like her mother's. It was cutting and deliberate. Are you deaf? She snapped one evening when Nkoli didn't respond fast enough. I said, bring me my handbag. Nkoli rushed to pick up the bag from the sofa, but Ijeoma yanked it from her hands. Do you know how much these bags cost? See the way you're holding my designer bag, Seth. This bag is worth more than your entire life. Nkoli looked at her, but said nothing. She had made her choice after all when she ran away from her father's house. She had known she could never return, but she never imagined she would end up here, broken, trapped. And then one day everything changed. Nkoli was scrubbing the living room floor when Ijeoma, lounging on the sofa, began talking on the phone. Haha, babe, you don't understand, Ijeoma giggled. My fiance is a very wealthy man. His father is Chief Agozie. You know Agozie Motors now. Nkoli's hands froze. Chief Agozie. Fiancé is Chief Agozie, Uche Agozie. Nkoli felt the air had been knocked out of her lungs. Uche, my brother. Her mind raced. After all this suffering, she had unknowingly walked into the house of the woman set to marry her brother. The very person she had needed to find all along. She forced herself to keep scrubbing, her heart pounding. Should I tell her? Should I reveal who I am? No, not yet, she told herself. Not until she knew the kind of woman Ijeoma truly was. If Nkoli had hoped that time would soften Ijeoma, she was wrong. You smell like poverty, Ijeoma sneered one afternoon, wrinkling her nose. Now what for you? One evening, Ijeoma stormed into Nkoli's room. Why did you wash the clothes I dropped on my bed, eh? Didn't you know they were to be washed? Nkoli tried to speak, but before she could utter a word, Ijeoma backed. Come on, go and wash them immediately. Nkoli stayed up all night washing. By morning, her hands were raw and her eyes bloodshot. She looked at her bruised palms, her aching body. How long can I endure this? She had thought escaping her father's house was freedom, but she had only run from one prison into another. One thing was certain, she could never let Uche marry Ijeoma. Ijeoma would never be her sister-in-law. Nkoli had become used to the hardship of Madam Amaka's house. She no longer flinched when Ijeoma insulted her. She endured it all, waiting for the right time to leave. But fate had other plans. One evening, the house was unusually busy. Madam Amaka had the gateman scrubbing the compound and the driver washing all the cars in the garage, even those that were rarely used. The air was filled with the scent of detergent and freshly cut grass. Nkoli overheard the driver muttering to himself, Oga Uzondo is coming back today. Her ears perked up. She had heard the name before but had never met him. Uzondo, Madam Amaka's only son, had been running the family business in Lagos for years. Unlike his sister, he rarely visited home. But this time was different. His arrival was not just a casual visit. There was something about his return that had the household on edge. Nkoli barely paid attention. Another rich, arrogant man, she told herself. But when Uzodi arrived, something about him was different. He greeted everyone, smiled at the security guard, and even thanked Nkoli when she served him water. That was a first. No one in this house had ever treated her like a human being. Days passed and Nkoli noticed that Uzondo was watching her every move. At first, she thought it was a coincidence, but then he started greeting her personally, asking how she was coping. One day, while she was washing clothes outside, he approached her. Do you enjoy working here? He asked. Nkoli hesitated, not sure if it was a trick question. I do what I have to do, sir. Uzondo chuckled. You don't have to call me sir. My name is Uzondo. Nkoli said nothing, but continued washing. She didn't want to get too comfortable. But Uzondo wasn't discouraged. He found himself drawn to Nkoli, seeking out opportunities to strike up light conversations with her. He would linger near the kitchen, casually asking about her day, or offer to help when he found her struggling with heavy chores. At first, Nkoli was uncomfortable, wary of his kindness. No one in that house had ever treated her with warmth before. But gradually, she started warming up to him. His presence became a rare comfort in a house filled with cruelty. She found herself waiting for his return from errands, her heart skipping a beat whenever he greeted her with his easy smile. Yet she remained cautious. She reminded herself of why she had decided to stay. Uzondu was a distraction and a friendship between them would be dangerous. But Uzondu persisted, never pushing, never demanding, just always present, always kind. One evening, as they found themselves alone in the corridor, he asked, Nkoli, do you ever think about leaving this place? Nkoli hesitated before answering, every single day. But unknown to Uzondu, she meant that in an entirely different way. His presence made her feel happy in a way she had never felt since she came to Akwuete. There was something about Uzondu, his warmth, his effortless kindness, that made the harshness of Madam Maka's house feel less suffocating. He soon started asking her personal questions, gently probing into her past, her dreams, her fears. But each time he tried to dig deeper, Nkoli would brush it off with a shy smile or quick change of topic. She wasn't ready to open up, at least not yet, perhaps not ever. One day, while she was sweeping the corridor, Uzondu leaned against the wall, watching her in thoughtful silence before he finally spoke. Nkoli, I don't know when it happened, but I find myself drawn to you. I'm not asking you for anything in return, but I want you to know I admire you greatly. Your strength, your resilience, the way you carry yourself with quiet dignity. It's very remarkable. And your smile is the kind that lights up even the darkest days. Nkoli froze, gripping the broom tightly. I'm sorry, Uzondu, but I'm just a maid. I can't afford to like someone like you. That night, sleep eluded her. She turned restlessly on the small mattress in the tiny servant's quarters, her heart whirring with her mind. The truth was she liked Uzondu too, more than she was willing to admit, but she knew better. She couldn't afford to let her feelings lead her into something impossible. She clutched in the tin blanket lightly. Should I tell him the truth? She whispered to herself. Her real name, who she really was, her real fears. But then she shook her head, stealing her resolve. No way. I can't let my emotions ruin everything. She had come too far, endured too much, and she wasn't about to throw it all away for a love that may never be. The next morning, during breakfast, Uzondu cleared his throat and addressed his mother and sister with a firm yet calm voice. I've been thinking a lot about Nkoli, he began, his gaze steady. She's different from anyone I've ever met. There's something about her resilience. I've never felt this way before. And I want you both to know that I'm seriously considering a future with her. Ijoma choked unhearty. A future with who? With a maid? She spat, glaring at him as if he lost his mind. Maka's spoon clattered against her plate. Uzondu, have you completely lost your senses? That girl that scrubs toilets and floors as my daughter-in-law? You cannot be serious. Uzondu leaned back, his expression unyielding. I've never been more serious in my life, oh. I may not have known her for long, but these past weeks have been the happiest I've felt in years. I won't ignore my feelings just because of what you expect from me. His words sent shockwaves through the room. Madam Maka and Ijoma exchanged horrified glances, their minds already racing with ways to put an end to what they saw as an impending disaster. The next morning, Ijoma cornered Nkoli in the corridor of her arms, eyes blazing with fury. You see that thing you did for my brother to start liking you? You had better go back and undo it. Oh, you think you can use my brother as an escape route for your poverty, eh? You better have a rethink because you will end up miserable. She sneered, stepping closer. You can never, ever trap Uzondu into your miserable existence. Never. Not while I'm still breathing. Nkoli swallowed hard, but said nothing. She had learned that arguing with Ijoma only made things worse. Ijoma's voice turned sharp, dripping with disdain. Let me make something very clear to you. You will never be anything more than a common housemaid. That's all you were meant to be, and that's all you will ever be. Nkoli felt the sting of the words, but stood her ground, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. She wouldn't give Ijoma the satisfaction of making her angry. She just had her straight face. After the incident, the torment intensified. Nkoli's days became longer, her workload doubled, and any moment of rest was snatched away. Madam Maka called her at all hours, often just to criticize trivial things. Ijoma's cruelty reached new heights. She no longer limited herself to words. If she was in a foul mood, anything within reach became a weapon. Shoes, handbags, even the occasional hairbrush, all flowing in Nkoli's direction without warning. Each day was a new battle, but Nkoli endured, refusing to break under their relentless hostility. One evening, Nkoli was in the kitchen cooking dinner when Ijoma stormed in, her face red with anger. "What nonsense are you cooking this time?" she barked. Nkoli turned, startled. "I'm trying to make dinner. There's a recipe Madam gave me that I'm trying to replicate." "Shut up," she shouted, "as if you can cook. Even with recipes, you still do nonsense." "I don't do nonsense," Nkoli snapped, anger and rage boiling. She had held back for so long and it looked like things were going worse by the day. "How dare you talk back at me?" she asked angrily, picking up a wooden spoon. As she tried to hit Nkoli with the spoon, Nkoli dodged, but in the process her head slammed against the sharp edge of the cupboard with a sickening thud. Immediately, Nkoli slumped and became unconscious. A scream rang through the house. Madam Maka and Uzondu came rushing in to see Nkoli lying on the floor, her head bleeding. Uzondu didn't hesitate. He scooped her into his arms and ran out of the house. "We are going to the hospital." Ijoma, shaking, tried to brush it off. "I think she's pretending." But when Nkoli didn't move, even she started to panic. As Uzondu carried Nkoli out, something slipped from the pocket of her apron, a small worn wallet. Ijoma's eyes caught it immediately. She bent down, picked it up and handed it to Uzondu as she settled Nkoli into the car. "This fell from the apron," she said, her voice tight. "Keep it for her." At the hospital, Nkoli was lying lifeless in an emergency ward while the doctors tried their best to rejuvenate her. Ijoma found herself pacing restlessly. What if she doesn't wake up again? What if she has a brain damage or loses her memory completely? As she spoke, she looked at Nkoli intently. Then her eyes fell on the small wallet that had dropped earlier, which was lying beside Nkoli in the emergency room. Curiosity or maybe guilt made her pick it up. She opened the wallet inside and pulled out an ID card. She read the name to herself. Nkoli Agozie. Agozie! Her heart pounded as she pulled out a small worn photograph inside the wallet. It showed a teenage Nkoli standing beside a familiar face. The face looked very much like Uche Agozie. The same Uche Agozie who was her fiance? No. Nkoli wouldn't know Uche. There was definitely a reason for that picture. And soon, when Nkoli woke, she would find out. Ijoma's mind raced. But what if she was really Uche's sister? The same twin sister that Uche talked about all the time. Her heart skipped as she thought of how she had maltreated her in the past months. Ijoma's words spun. If Uche found out what she had done to his sister, would he still want her? She quickly stuffed the wallet back into Nkoli's bag, her mind racing. She won't ask any more questions. She would just wait it out. But one thing was clear. Her future with Uche Agozie was now uncertain.